So, but when we think about Ambedkar, the important thing to remember is that Ambedkar provides us with a vocabulary. Ambedkar provides us with a conceptual framework for thinking about the fundamental value of human life as well as the degradation of human life in India. So we should see him more as a political philosopher because he was a spectacular failure as a politician. He never won an election in his life. He was unable to put together a political party. Interestingly enough, the way in which Indian intellectuals have looked at this question is to study Gandhi as the political philosopher. As far as I'm concerned, Gandhi has very little to offer us in terms of understanding Indian society. He is a 19th century conservative when it comes to his understanding of Indian society, of understanding the place of human beings, of seeing Varnashrama Dharma as being valid, of a certain kind of ordering of society as being valid. Ambedkar goes to the heart of the problem, right? Where you think about his plangent phrases, right, of graded sovereignty, the ascending hierarchy of reverence and the descending hierarchy of contempt. These are caste is not a division of labor, it is a division of laborers. I could reel off phrases from across his oeuvre which actually give you a purchase on the real nature of Indian society. And I think people have not begun to engage with Ambedkar as a thinker as yet. When I say that, of course, there are a few academics who have done this and some books which have come out and so on. But politically, to understand that India is fundamentally an inegalitarian, violent, and hierarchical society, that's where all politics must begin, right? And not be suborned to the delusion that the solutions can come from elsewhere. We can't think history in terms of histories that come from elsewhere. And this is the fundamental lesson that Ambedkar teaches as well, which is why he goes back to studying the Sanskrit text, the Pali text, to a study of Buddhism, because he knows that the solutions to the problems that are rife in India can only come from Indian forms of thinking, which are mired in hierarchy and attempts to resolve it.
That's fascinating. But again, so when we go back to that time about 100 years ago, when Ambedkar was, more than 100 years ago, I guess, when Ambedkar was sort of forming what would become his political philosophy, we have several strains of what we can describe as Indian political philosophy coming to the fore, right? So one we can describe as, say, a Nehruvian political philosophy that maybe has its basis in, say, the Bhakti Sufi traditions is at least part of it, but also in sort of liberalism with a, classical European liberalism. We have Ambedkar's philosophy, as you've well described. I'm not sure if Gandhi counts. Gandhi just has some thoughts that may or may not be applicable about, the importance of village life and Rama Rajya as a kind of catch-all for whatever he sees as good in society. But then you also have this guy, V.D. Savarkar, who comes up and who is putting forward a theory of ethno-nationalism, which is a combination, I would argue, and you can disagree with me, but it is a combination of pure Italian fascism in the mold of Mussolini, or Mussolini's writings, combined with his understanding of a reification of the caste system and a reimagining of the caste system, combined with sort of random elements of Islamophobia in there as well. So, if we distinguish between these three, a cynic would say, well, the one that's been the most successful by far is the Hindutva one, because they're the ones who are dominant today. What would you say in response to that? Yeah,
actually, there's a whole range of ideas that you put forward there. I mean, and generally the ways in which this whole formulation has been put is in terms of Nehru, the modernizer, right? The Western modernizer, liberal Western modernizer, Gandhi, the traditional conservative, Ambedkar, the traditional radical, and Savarkar as the Hindu conservative, right? As opposed to a traditional conservative, because Gandhi draws upon multiple traditions and so on and so forth. Now, the important thing here is that both Gandhi and Savarkar have an enormous amount in common in terms of thinking from within a existing Hindu paradigm. Right? So Gandhi works with ideas of order. He's very much concerned with the idea of the proper, right? And this is something that even those who would have a very a solid intellectual evaluation of Gandhi among liberal philosophers working in the West, they would still understand him as a conservative thinker with an idea of the proper, which means that there is a notion of society that is and social cohesion that is central to his work. Now, of course, Gandhi, as we know, is not somebody who's a proponent of Hindu majoritarianism. In fact, that was something that he constantly tried to work against, but he worked with Hindu ideas. You mentioned Ram Rajya, and certainly we could think about his idea of an ideal order being rooted in Hindu forms of social organization. Now, Savarkar works with the premise that India is a Hindu country, right? I mean, which is in some sense carrying that logic of that Gandhi worked with to a reductio ad absurdum, right? That it's a Hindu country, we should just begin there, and people need to participate in, work within, subordinate themselves to this existing hierarchy. Interestingly enough, it's there is greater reflection within Hedgewar, Golwalkar, and Savarkar of the idea of caste and caste subordination as being something that is a fundamental challenge or raises a fundamental challenge for Hinduism, because if Hinduism is to present itself, or Hindus are to present themselves as a united body, they're going to founder on this fundamental idea that some are more equal than the others. So they are more apprised of, more engaged with the idea of caste, also because they come from Nagpur, where it's important to remember that the formation of Hindu, majoritarian Hindu fundamentalist thought arises as a result of two challenges. One is the challenge of the Muslim presence. The other is the challenge afforded by lower caste movements, right? So it's in the face of those two that they try and forge an ideology of cohesion. So in that sense, for me, the fact that Gandhi and Savarkar have a lot in common is crucial. The second thing is that the presentation of India as a Hindu country and the Hindus as hard done by within their own country is an argument that has been in the making for almost like 70, 80 years. And it has acquired different kinds of formulations, including more recent, in the recent past, the idea of Muslim appeasement. Right? So, yes, I would agree with you to come back to the question that you asked me. Yes, I would agree with you that Hindutva appears as the most successful rendition of a political philosophy and a political program in India right now, largely because of the bad faith, right, that was central to the political order of post-independent India, where gestures were made towards the resolution of caste inequality. And this is true, caste inequality has never gone away, right? Starting from 1947 to now, the life of a Dalit is worthless and killings of Dalits continue. Think again about the idea of the appeasement of Muslims. If you think about that in another way, there has always been a kind of practice of bad faith to the presence of Muslims, where Muslims in India, where while at this one level there is an attempt to engage with the fact that we have a minority that needs certain kinds of protections, there's always been this attempt to create vote banks, attempts to engage with the politics of being a Muslim and Muslim politics in India through purely pragmatic and opportunistic ways by nearly all the political parties. So in that sense, the coming to power of the BJP represents in many ways the failure of around 40 years of a certain kind of Congress nationalist politics as well. And this is something that we have to reckon with, that there has been bad faith in terms of an inability to handle with principle and integrity this question of inequality within Hinduism and the presence of a very strong minority which needs a certain kind of nurturing within the polity. I mean, the Shah Bano case is one example of many that we could think about. Think about also the fact of, even as today the bulldozers are going around in BJP states demolishing Muslim settlements, the Turkman Gate massacre was organized under the Congress regime in the 1970s. And at that point, no one spoke about the fact that, look here, these are Muslims being targeted, right? It was presented as the idea of development, of slum clearance. All of those are chilling echoes of what Narendra Modi is telling us right now, right? This whole process. So in that sense, it's a continuing rhetoric of bad faith which has led to the triumph of Hindutva.